let's get to the Dragic things. I know that's what people want to talk about. He got the buyout. We anticipated he would get the buyout. He could return to the Heat. He has obviously been hanging around the Heat quite a bit, along with Tyler Johnson and others. He's made it pretty clear he'd like to be here. But John, let's establish this. I mean, does it make sense? I mean, does it make sense for him, and it doesn't make sense for them?
I mean, for him, it doesn't really make sense either way, right? Because if he comes here, it doesn't seem like he's going to get any playing time. I think the only thing for him was if he just wants to be in Miami, maybe be in a developmental role, a UD kind of role, help develop these younger guards, something like that. But as far as the Heat goes, I mean, you have Kyle Lowry as your starting point guard. I've loved what Gabe Vincent has developed into. And on top of that, Tyler Hero is kind of a combo guard. He can play a little point. He can, facilitate a little bit. Victor Oladipo is coming back as well. We have a lot of guards, and it's going to be tough to fit another guard that can't play defense on our team. So I don't see it really working out either way. I would love the story. If he wants to come back and just sit on the bench and he's okay with that veteran, just sit back role, cool. But I think for the Heat, there's probably even better options if you want to sign somebody.
Ricky, everybody, looks at these stories and they say, is the guy going to play for you? Is he not? I want to go back historically with you a little bit here with the Heat. The Heat have done a lot of reunions over the years. A lot of reunions. The two that jump out the most, of course, would be Zoe and Dwayne, right? Different circumstances. But Zoe came back and he felt that there was a legitimate role for him there. Like there was a role behind Shaq as a backup center. And he obviously exploited that role, in the best way possible in Game 6 in Dallas and at times throughout that season. We also saw guys like Steve Smith and Eddie Jones come back later in their careers, right? People forget those reunions, okay? But those were significant Heat players that were brought back and really didn't do much, when they came back. What would a reunion like this, where would you put this one if it was to happen?
I would put this between Steve Smith and Dwayne Wade and co. Because, look, I understand why Heat fans want a guy that they loved to come back right as this team is in contention. But if I were to liken this situation to a real life situation that maybe some of us have experienced, it's like breaking up with someone and thinking, okay, we'll see each other down the line, only to come back and realize they're at a different point in their life and it's not compatible anymore. Gabe Vincent was an unexpected development for this team. And while I'm not completely sold on his total viability as a backup point guard, I'm confident enough to believe that if you throw him in a heated playoff game, he'll do his thing. I think at this point in Goran Dragic's career, much to the chagrin of certain Heat fans most likely, you're looking at a player that should probably go to a place where he'll likely get minutes and more consistent minutes. I don't see that happening anymore with this Heat team. Like Greg mentioned just now, we haven't even seen Victor Oladipo come back yet, and we've been debating we've already been debating who's going to be getting minutes or who's going to be losing minutes as a result of Depot's return. So I think for Goran Dragic, teams like the Bucks, teams like maybe even the Mavs, where he was technically already traded to for a couple hours before that trade was rescinded because of the Slovenian connection. I think it's time to move on. I mean, I'd love to see him win a title with Miami, but he got traded from the team. His number got replaced, and this was all after he did the whole sacrifice Heat culture thing, right? So I don't know. I think it's time for something different. And as much as I would like to, I don't see that working out this time around. There's too much basketball left in those legs.
Where's he going, Ethan?
It's a tough one. I think ultimately it may be Milwaukee. If you're looking at the best chance to win right now and get time, Milwaukee needs guards. Like they traded DiVincenzo. They don't have Connaughton for a month. I mean, they need other guys. And also, Drew is a guy who can play both spots. So you can play him with Dragic, and he also can cover up for Dragic's weaknesses defensively. Like, if I look at all the fit, I know that's the last place that Heat fans want him to go, and I know obviously that will pull at Goran. And since he doesn't have real ill will towards the organization, he's not going to go there out of spite, which we've seen some players go places out of spite. But if I'm just looking at the landscape, I'm saying, okay, Dallas can use him, but they just brought in Dinwiddie. And they already Brunson's played a bigger role this year. So does that one really make sense? Why would you go to the Lakers right now? I wouldn't want to be part of that bleep show in any capacity. Okay, he's 3 years late for that. So I mean, to me, it's Milwaukee would make the most sense. I mean, I thought Chicago maybe with Ball still out, but I would lean Milwaukee. But let me go to you and Brady on this, and I'll let you guys debate this a little bit. I actually think a Dragic reunion next season makes more sense, and I always thought so. Because the Heat will have some time to evaluate Oladipo. They may also make another move over the summer, and being able to bring Dragic in on a minimum, let's say a minimum contract or a cheap contract, might allow you to include Gabe Vincent in a trade if you wanted to. It feels more natural to happen this offseason. Look, I understand Goran wants to be in Miami. I think we sort of know about Goran's personal issues that he's dealing with right now, where I feel like being around old friends would be helpful to him. But I'll go to you, Brady, and then Greg, you can get into the mechanics of this from a cap perspective and everything else. But like from a personnel perspective, but Brady, wouldn't it make more sense to just get him in the mix next year if that's the case? I mean, how does it fit now?
I mean, I would go against that point just because I think if they bring him in this year or if it's next year, I don't think it's to perform in a rotation. Like this feels like a Jimmy Butler friend that's going to be on the bench. They're going to have a good time. Like that's what this feels like. Like you guys were talking about reunions and bringing guys back. I just don't see it being here. We're going to send Gabe out and we need a guy to replace the production of Gabe as a backup point guard. Like I just don't think that's what they're looking at him at this stage. I think if they do it, I would argue it makes more sense now because they're on a decent trajectory. They're in the 1 seed. You want to bring them in at a decent time because they're in a winning spot. I just feel like that makes more sense. But obviously, if they need some fillers, if they send a bunch of guys out in the offseason, they need some fillers. I think Goran's a guy that they would feel comfortable plugging in if need be. But I just don't think that's going to be the spot that they're in.
I mean, I think what we have to recognize is, and we did this on 5 on the Floor a lot last year, we kept waiting for Goran to be the Goran of the previous season, right? Like, we kept waiting for him to be what he was before the foot injury in the finals. We kept doing those hopeful podcasts. Remember, there was like a 16-point explosion against Chicago, and we were sort of like, okay, he's there. But the reality was, if you really looked at last season, he wasn't that good. And I hate to say that because I think a lot of it is he did rush back from the injury, and maybe he will get better now, Greg. But I think, and I'll go to Jonathan after this, but like I think we're thinking sort of Goran from the Eastern Conference Finals in the bubble, and I think forgetting kind of what happened last year.
Agreed. And also he's been out this whole season. So then expecting him to come in and get into the kind of shape that these other guys who have been getting consistent reps and are hungry and are trying to like extend their vet minimum contract careers like Gabe is. I don't see that being and also we can't ignore the fact that the Heat don't need any more guards and they could use another big. So like, if we're going to really, mince words about who needs to have the last roster spot, it should be a player that they have positional needs for, but he could play all the home games in Brooklyn. I mean, that's one thing, because they don't have a point guard at home, but they have one on the road, which is bizarre. The Celtics have roster spots. But I don't know that he'll go there. So Milwaukee is like, that's the worst case scenario, because I would hate to face him. But they've got the roster spots. They signed Bembry today, so that's one of them. And then Goran would be another. So I don't know. Milwaukee feels likely to me, but this is a reunion for like on a vet minimum as a backup point guard in the coming seasons when the Heat are going to need players to contribute at vet minimum contracts. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes more sense to me than now.